Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah reading, Parashat Vayakhel Pikudei, ends the book of Exodus and brings us one step closer to the book of Leviticus and to the holiday of Passover. The very beginning of Parashat Vayakhel, we read these words: Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Yisrael vayomer alehem. Moses then convoked the whole Israelite community. He brings the community together and he says to them the following words. And he talks to them about God's commandments concerning Shabbat and the building of the Mishkan. It is amazing to think of the power of this one word, Vayakhel, convoked, brought together. We can hear the word kihila in there, the Hebrew word for community. The word Vayakhel is only used in the Torah to describe when people come together. It's not used for flocks or herds of animals or anything like that. It's just people. And it's not only when people do good things, it's sometimes when people do bad things as well. As in last week's Torah reading, when we read that this same verb was used to describe how the people gathered around Aaron as they demanded of him that he build them a golden calf, an egel hazahav. We all know how that turned out. In this week's Torah reading, though, it turns out much better. Moses gathers the people together and he tells them the laws of Shabbat. He tells them about the Mishkan, about the building of the desert tabernacle. It's interesting to think of this Torah reading being one of the last, along with Pikudei, of the book of Exodus. So why is it interesting to think about that? Because the whole book of Exodus is about the idea of God's presence among the people. The people can come together for all kinds of things. In the first part of the book, the people came together for Yitziat Mitzrayim, for the Exodus from Egypt. In the middle part of the book, the people came together when they learned the law, that they were revealed by God at Mount Sinai. And in this last third of the book, the people come together to build a Mishkan, to build a tabernacle. The people come together to see God's presence and to have the ability to be there in God's presence. The book of Exodus ends with this verse. It's the very last verse. Ki anan Adonai ala mishkan yomam ve'esh tihya laila bo. For over the tabernacle a cloud of the Lord rested by day, and fire would appear in it by night, in the view of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys. The book of Exodus ends by telling us that the house of Israel, the whole people of Israel, was together. They were united in God's presence. It's fascinating for me, and perhaps for you as well, to read these verses and to think about this idea about being together when, of course, we're not able to be together, at least not in the way we are used to, at least not in our whole community. We're just starting to think about what it might mean to think about being together. With the vaccinations moving along at a good pace, perhaps it will be in a few months, or maybe even a few weeks, when slightly larger groups can come together, and then larger groups and larger and larger. And pretty soon we'll be back together the way we used to. But it is amazing to think about all of that in light of these parashiot, these two Torah readings, and that verse at the very beginning of people coming together, and of what Rashi says on that verse. So what does Rashi say? Rashi says on the word Vayakhel, and Moses convoked them, brought them together, V'hu lashon hif'il. This was written in the causative form. She'eno osef anashim bayadayim, elehen ne'esafin al pi diburo. Because you don't gather people together with your hands, forcing them to come together. You gather them together with your words, and you convince them to come together. What would it be like for us to be together? What would it be like for us to have an incredible mission to move us forward, like the building of the Mishkan, coming together for a beautiful purpose? I hope that all of us can think about these ideas in these next several weeks and months as we contemplate what it will be like to come together. I know that we have an incredible kihila kedosha, an incredible holy community here, using that same word for convoking, coming together. And I know that it is just not the same without each one of you here. Coming together as we do, coming together for a good purpose, for a holy purpose, that is what we do as a community. I look forward to the day when we can be together, I look forward to the moment when I will look out in the sanctuary, in the auditorium, and I will see you, and I will know that we are really gathered together. Until that time, though, we can gather in spirit, and we can still do wonderful things and important work out there in the world. Our community doesn't just exist in this building. Our community exists out there, wherever you are, and wherever you allow that presence of God to rest, as the end of the book of Exodus says. Wherever you allow that presence to rest, that is where our community sits. And that is where we can all bring a Kiddush Hashem. We can all sanctify God's name for the world at large. Shabbat Shalom.